providing a head start for any psychology student who is attempting Unit 3-4 next year. Just going to provide a very brief outline of what to expect for the subject. Let's start by just briefly defining what we mean by psychology as a study. It's a scientific study of behaviour and mental processes. Some trivia that you might find of interest or not. Psychology is currently the third most popular Unit 3-4 subject, behind English and further, just ahead of methods. Last year in 2011 we had 16,500 and just slightly less than that this year in 2012. Students often ask me, how is their score calculated? This is quite complicated, but basically your exam score combined with your SACs will be added up. All scores for the 16,500 students, let's say, who do the subject will be put on a normal like distribution curve. If you're in the top 2%, so 2% is 16,500, that's 330 students. Top 330 students get 45 plus. To crack a 40, you need to be in the top 9%, so in the top 1,400, 1,500 students. And if you're a middle of the road student, i.e. in the middle of that bell curve, then you're going to be around the 30 mark. I know this is a bit difficult to see, but I always get asked this by students in terms of scaling. If you get a 50, that remains a 50, and even if you get a 45 plus, that will not be scaled down generally. A 40 goes down to a 39, and this varies year to year, not much though. 35 will go down to a 33, a 30 will go down to 28. And if you look at the scaling for further, it's actually quite similar to the scaling for further maths. In terms of the actual calculation of your study score, pre-scaling, 40% of your score is based on SACs, with the other 60% based on the November examination on the full year's work. In terms of the SACs themselves, there are compulsory SACs. For instance, a memory SAC must be on a report of a research evaluation comparing memory theories. There is another compulsory SAC requiring a folio of at least 5 activities or annotations in the learning area study in Unit 4. For other SACs, this will basically depend on your teacher/school discretion. Most schools, I anticipate, will be doing at least one test, possibly folios, visual presentations, media responses, and there are other options. So that really depends on schools. I will be doing tests with my students. In terms of the November exam, currently the understanding is that it's going to be a 130 mark exam with half of the marks allocated for multi-choice. There will be a section B short answer section where many of the questions will be 2 marks with a few 1 and 3 markers thrown in, and that's going to add up to 50 marks. And the section C is going to be a research scenario which will be around a page in length, and then you'll have to write a extended response on that, so possibly part of an introduction and a discussion. And then there'll be a couple of short answer questions, e.g. operationalise the IV for 1 mark, operationalise the DV for 1 mark, maybe a question about the research design used, etc. So in terms of the actual content in the 3-4 course, there are 2 areas of study in both Unit 3 and Unit 4. In Unit 3 we have mind, brain and body. So we're looking at consciousness, lobes of the brain, left hemi, right hemi, etc. In memory, we'll look at the neural basis of memory, memory theories, forgetting, etc. In Unit 4, there'll be learning theories. That's the first area of study: classical conditioning, operant conditioning, social learning theory, etc. There's also a neural component there. And the second area of study is mental health, looking at normality versus abnormality, stress, the biopsychosocial framework of mental health. And I've got under each of the Unit 3 and Unit 4 headings research. there is a research component that basically affects the entire course, so it's worth considering that. I like to think of it as the fifth area of study. There are quite a number of students out there who haven't done 1-2 Psych. I've got 5 at my school next year who haven't done it. So my advice for you people in terms of how to best prepare for Psych for next year is go over the research, because that's what a lot of Unit 1-2 students would have spent a bit of time on last year. All the other stuff that I mentioned before, the memory, the learning, mental health, that only really plays a small, if any, part in Unit 1-2, so you will be going over that from scratch again next year, but you really need to be quite savvy in some of the research skills. So this is what I'd be aiming to tick off over the holiday in terms of the boxes that you'd want to tick off in terms of your understanding. You need to be able to write a research hypothesis from a scenario given, including the ability to operationalise the IV and the DV, the independent and dependent variable. You need to be able to make statistical conclusions in terms of the hypothesis and a generalisation if applicable. You need to be able to identify extraneous or confounding variables. You need to be able to discuss methods of reducing those extraneous or confounding variables. A basic understanding of sampling techniques, particularly random versus convenience sampling. Identification and evaluation of the advantages and disadvantages of research designs, namely independent groups, repeated measures, or match pairs, and a basic understanding of the ethics. So I hope this helps, and good luck to all Unit 3-4 students for next year for Psych.